Hello everyone, welcome back to SwitchUp. Now Yasha, Legends of the Demon Blade caught loads of your attention in Glen's upcoming game series from the weekend, and I have to be honest, it also caught mine. It looks absolutely cracking. It's set in a fantastical version of the Edo period in Japan, and it takes more than a few cues from some of the best roguelites that we've got, things like Hades, but also the more recent Splintered Fate that Glen reviewed for us. This one is developed by 7 Quark and is published by Game Source Entertainment. Yeah, that's the same Game Source that published Voice Love on Air. Huh? What do you mean you haven't played it? You're missing a gem. Here you can choose between 3 main protagonists. Each has their own unique combat styles, their own storyline. But is this a demon slashing adventure that's a cut above the rest, or does it get lost in the shadows? Well, my name's Mark Walker. Welcome back to SwitchUp. Now let's find out. Alright, what's it actually about? Well, each of the 3 protagonists comes at the main story narrative from a different angle. They each have their own cutscenes, their own dialogue interactions, and these aren't all heroes. In fact, there's an anti-hero in amongst the mix. But essentially there's a delicate balance between humans and demons that's been absolutely blown apart with the rise of the 9-tailed fox. No, Naruto doesn't show up. In fact, this is the Demon King, who's doing the usual thing that Demon Kings do, raising up an army and trying to destroy the world. The 3 protagonists include an immortal ninja, a demon emissary, and an anthropomorphic samurai. To help them defeat the 9-tailed fox, they are looking for these legendary demonic blades. That ties into the gameplay, which I'll talk about in a bit, and there's different dialogue that plays out over their runs, very akin to Hades. I do feel like some of the Japanese translation isn't the best over to English. It just has that feel that they've potentially tried to adapt it, adding in a few colloquialisms that don't land quite right, but I was actually pleased to see this much narrative within the experience. Initially, you'll start out in what amounts to the game's hub area, a small village. It's from here that you can apply meta progression to your character after each run. There's also an incredibly interesting weapon mechanic, which I'll talk about shortly, but let's rush straight through into the combat. Now when you begin a run, each of the 3 characters will start in the same location. That combat's going to feel instantly familiar if you've played any of the roguelites that I've mentioned. It's very fast paced, there's almost no latency, and you've got the classics such as a quick dodge move, but also a counter and parry system. When the enemy flashes, if you can press the bumper quick enough, you'll trigger a parry attack. That'll momentarily stagger the enemy, leaving you a nice window to wail upon them using either light or heavy attacks, or your more powerful charged magic abilities. There are some cool little details, like the demons might actually unintentionally kill each other, and each time the screen's cleared, new enemies will spawn in until you've eradicated all of them from an area, at which point you're usually granted a soul orb. The classic 3-choice system. They'll enhance your skills, they may tweak your playstyle ever so slightly, but you'll also find things like amulets which offer blessings, temporary boosts, or forbidden upgrades, which are powerful but have their own risks. Once the area is clear, the door opens and you'll progress to the next. This is one element that some may feel is a little too linear. Your runs will follow a very similar pattern each time. I think perhaps offering multiple doors and exits is always a good idea because it gives the feeling of variety, even if the overall experience to the boss is actually quite similar. Now I mentioned the interesting weapon mechanics, and that's probably a good time to talk about those. As I say, between rounds you will have this meta currency, but also fighting those bosses will get you components for crafting new weapons. And that's where things took a much more interesting turn for me. Basically, the blacksmith within the town can craft you a number of different weapons that require certain components, but they add a very much Monster Hunter feel to them. Different elemental abilities. They each have unique skills tied to them, like corrosive damage and a huge explosion, or the Sakura blossoms with every strike, which every time you land a strike spawns a bomb that can then be detonated with your magical move. The combat instantly becomes much more interesting. These weapons are also unlocked really quickly. It's going to take you 1 or 2 runs and you'll have the option to equip any of those. You've got to remember you've got 3 characters and each of them have a big selection of those weapons, and you can switch between them on the fly, with some of them synergizing with others. So then you've made your choice of weapon, happens, you go into a new run, and once you've defeated the enemies in an area, you'll begin to notice that the soul orbs now actually reflect the weapons you've got. That's when you start to see the scope of the game. It's much bigger than first meets the eye. As you're moving and progressing through the stages, it's not always combat. Sometimes you'll enter a small village where you can replenish some health, and there are bonus stages, optional ones, that you can choose to take part in. If you're successful, and there's a time limit tied to these, you'll get a big reward, but if you fail, you lose 50% of your health. There's also a currency that you're gathering from all these monsters that you can buy in-game blessings that will give you permanent upgrades for that run, or replenish something to get your health back. The further you get into the game, the more areas you'll unlock, but it all comes down to your skill. And I'm pleased to say that. For me, there are so many roguelites that rely solely on RNG, that's the random number generator factor, whereby you'll just have such a good run because you collected that shiny talisman that carries you all the way to the finish. Don't get me wrong, there is still some of that here. One of them that I had meant that every time I parried, I got most of my health back. That was a right touch, but it will not help you if you have no skill. The boss fights really bring out the best of the experience. These are well designed, well structured, and they just look cool. Some of them do tend to have a health bar that expects you to be more powerful. So earlier runs, although they can be defeated, they can drag on a little bit too long. They are multi-stage, so when you hit 50% of their health, their moveset will slightly alter, and there are variations between different runs, which I won't spoil, but it definitely keeps it more interesting. When it comes to controls, the game handles brilliantly. The cooldowns for things like your dash makes sense and can be upgraded, and the fact that you've got 3 different characters, each with unique stories to play through, it adds a good amount of variety. Sadly, it is let down in a couple of areas. One is enemy variety being a little lacking. Some may find it feels overly linear. And 3, the waffle is real in those dialogue sections, but it still is fun and fans will enjoy it. I give gameplay a solid 15 out of 20. The controls are excellent, but the parry window and the effect of it aren't quite as impactful as I think they should be. It's a move that's difficult to time, but unless you get a very specific upgrade, is pretty limited in its actual scope. Control score 17 out of 20. I do love the Japanese aesthetic of this one in the traditional Edo period style. It boasts this vibrant color palette that looks fantastic, almost like a Japanese painting. And the environments themselves are very rich in cultural motifs. A couple of the characters aren't that interesting. I found the anthropomorphic samurai looks very cool, but the other 2 are a tad generic, if you ask me. The bosses look great though, and although the variety of enemies isn't as big as I would like, they do also look quality. Performance is what they've targeted here over visual fidelity. It's running at 60 FPS, it feels really smooth and responsive, but visually you'll see quite a few aliased edges. If you're using this on like a big 4K TV, it's a tad rough around the edges. The soundtrack though, and the voice acting in its native Japanese is really good. There's an overall excellent ambience. I found the melee combat much more gratifying from an audio perspective. Weapons have an appropriately impactful sound, whereas the samurai's archer ability is just a bit meh when it comes to the sound. The visuals and performance combined, they score 16 out of 20. Some of those cutscenes really do bring things up. Sound and audio, that scores 17 out of 20. Yasha, Legend of the Demon Blade, does have a physical copy available that you can buy over at Amazon or, well, wherever really, and that retails at 25 quid. There's also a deluxe edition for £44, and the physical launches on August the 1st. Digitally, it's £26.99, which is a bit odd. And in my opinion, you should always price yourself in relation to the game that you're most similar to that's at the top of the genre. And that would be Hades, which is £22. So it's a little over that, and that will be reflected in the score that I give. Still, there's quite a bit of content here, and having the 3 different characters, each with all of those different weapons to unlock and the storylines to work through in the chapters, it's good. It's a very enjoyable experience, just a little overpriced. I give value 14 out of 20. Yasha Legends of the Demon Blade is an enjoyable iteration within a busy genre that might just win over quite a few people with its interesting weapon mechanics and lovely Edo period setting. While not perfect, it's a lot of fun and gets a SwitchUp score of 79%. Alright, it's so nice when there's actually games to review. Like, I cannot wait until Switch 2 comes out and we just have, you know, that influx of titles and we can just pick out the ones that you guys are like, oh, that looks interesting. This for the week is definitely the one that looked most interesting in my opinion. And yeah, it's an enjoyable game, just a little bit overpriced. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Thanks to all of you that enjoy the content. And yeah, as always, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers, guys. See ya!